Hi, I'm Martin Curtis, and this is Change from the Centre. So last week I said I was going to talk about uh, politics through the eyes of younger people. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. And part of it was inspired by Alan Milburn's report, although not entirely. I've been thinking about doing this for a long time. And the point I made last week was that we need to start looking at how our political system is operating for our younger people, because there's a reality that actually we're failing them. Part of that is because younger people are less likely to vote, but it's something that I think we need to be very, very careful of. And I'll come to the reasons for that later on. But that Milburn report was really, really important. And it was commissioned by the government. So, we've got to hope that somewhere some action is taken as a result of it. It was called The Lost Generation. And one of the points it made was that currently we have 1 million people who are not in employment, education, or training. That's pretty disastrous. But he also talks about the fact that that will rise to 1.25 million within 5 years if we don't do anything about it. And he also talked about some of the reasons for it, about mental health issues and a number of other things. But the other thing he talked about was the fact that we spend far too much money on welfare and not enough on getting people into work. I'm going to play this clip, which highlights that really. And it's his words, and it's from a BBC interview with Laura Kunsberg a week ago.
As we've uncovered in the course of this review, for every £25 that we spend keeping young people on benefits, we spend only £1 helping them get into work through employment support.
So the taxpayer is spending 25 times as much money
25 quid, 25 times as much, exactly right.
on benefits for young people
Correct.
than helping them get the skills they need to get into work.
Correct. So this is a failure. This is a failure of the welfare system, but it's a failure, I'm sorry, of the school system, the skills system, the health system. What we're doing is we're not prioritising getting young people into a situation where they can be learning or earning, and instead we're transporting them into the world of benefits with incalculable costs for their life chances.
Now, that 25-to-1 ratio is really important, not just because of what it means for younger people, although that's absolutely critical, and how younger people will perceive that. It's a great example of how in our political system, we seem to love backloading funding. So putting it at the wrong end so that we deal with a consequence of something rather than funding it so that it doesn't happen. I've used the prison system as an example of this in the past, where we have a prison system where we keep sending more and more people to prison, where they learn to be better criminals, and they leave prison and go back in again. And we've got this spiraling cost when we should be investing in it at the front end so that we prevent cost. But this one has a huge impact on individuals' lives as well. So Alan Milburn talked about the long-term scarring cost of this, where it could cost an individual up to £300,000 in his lifetime of lost earnings, as well as 125 billion cost of the state. So this is a huge issue, but it's not the only issue that we've got to deal with. And this is the important part. There's accumulation of these things where we're really not doing younger people any favors. So the next one I'm going to use is universities, where we've spent years and years encouraging people to go to universities. By and large, that's been a great thing. I think the imbalance we had has started to be dealt with now through growths in apprenticeships and stuff like that. But part of this is telling people it's okay to take out a student loan, and in fact mandating that they take out a student loan almost in order to partake in their university education. But that system is failing. There's no two ways about it. The clip I'm going to play you now is from Sky News. Sky are really, really good at these sort of statistical charts and things like that. So I'm going to play this one and then talk about it afterwards.
2012, there was a new repayment plan called Plan 2 that was brought in. This was brought in to coincide with tuition fees going up to £9,000. And Plan 2 said that students had to repay their loan at an interest rate of inflation plus 3%. So these first new repayment plans came in for students in 2016-17. Let's zoom out and see what has happened to this balance since then. And you will see that the amount of interest added to student loan balances each year relative to the amount they are paying down has absolutely soared, trapping students from the period of 2012 to 2023 who were on this special repayment plan in their student loans. Clearly, way more being added to how much they owe than how much they're able to pay off each year.
So the story so far is, if you're a young person, it's hard for you to find a job. And the government prefers to backload funding to pay you benefits than they do front load it to help you find work in the first place. If and when you do find work, if you have a student loan and you start to pay it back, the amount of debt you have continues to grow despite the fact that you do everything right. You can see why young people have a right to be disillusioned with our political system. And on that latter point on student loans, I really, really don't understand why government haven't dealt with it as a matter of urgency. I don't mean just this government, I mean the previous government as well. It's a clear injustice, and the government should step in and do something. So, leaving education and finding a job are not the end of the issues that young people face. Historically, the next step, having found some sort of stable employment, settled down into a career, used to be to buy a house. So I'm going to put up a chart now that shows the difference in house pricing between now and 40 years ago when I first bought my house. So in 1986, the average house price was just over 3 times average income. Nowadays, that figure is 7.5 times. So buying a house is increasingly becoming unaffordable. What younger people are doing is actually going into the rented sector. And in many cases, the cost of their rent is so high that they find it difficult to save up a huge deposit that they need in order to buy a house. So increasingly, buying a house where it used to be a rite of passage is the equivalent of a lottery win, just with better curtains. But even that isn't the end of it. Imagine having settled down, the next step used to be to have children. So the average cost of childcare is about a third of an average wage. So we're telling couples that we want them both to work. Actually, it's unaffordable often for just one of them to work anyway. But we're making the cost of childcare basically out of the reach. A lot of people will say that they're basically working for nothing while their children go through childcare. I could go on and on. I want to just finish with the childcare with something that is really important. We know there's a crisis at the moment in maternity, and reviews going on looking at that at the moment. One of the reasons that we may be seeing issues is because we have a lot of older mums, because they are having to build their career so that they're earning enough to be able to afford childcare. Something we need to think about. Yes, we need to deal with all of the issues and look at it in the round, but we need to think about whether the issues that younger people face are delaying increasingly the age at which they're having children. So I could go on and on identifying issues where younger people have a right to feel like the system is giving them a raw deal. But I'm going to finish really on taxation, and in particular, the pension triple lock. So younger people are, like all of us, paying huge amounts of taxation, but they're also seeing themselves getting a raw deal from the system. I think I've shown that. At the same time, they're looking at the pension triple lock and thinking that they're paying to get pensioners better and better off. Now, I think the pension triple lock had a purpose. but I think it's increasingly clear that it's served its purpose and that we need to find a mechanism to replace it that makes sure that pensions don't devalue over time, which is the issue that caused the pension triple lock to come into being in the first place. But you can see it from the eye of a younger person, and it contributes to this bigger picture, which is that whereas they're looking at a pension triple lock, what they've got is a triple squeeze, which is debt, rent and tax. So I think it's time that we started to sympathize with them, and we start to think about, rather than just serving older people because they're the ones that are turning out to vote, doing things to encourage young people to get out and vote and take part in our democracy. We are very lucky in this country that younger people have not drifted, certainly to the right. You could argue they are drifting to the left and taking up with the Greens, but they're certainly not drifting to the right in the way that they have in Germany, for example, where younger people were a significant part of the AfD's vote, and we're not seeing younger people voting for reform by and large. Now, I ought to say here, I'm not saying reform and AfD are the same, but they are organisations that have similarities in terms of their approach, as an example, to immigration. So I think the media and politicians in particular need to start waking up and talking about this raw deal that younger people get and starting to look for solutions to it. I go back to Tony Blair's essay and the idea of a radical centre. And that's what we need. We need that radical centre to recognise this as an issue and start to fundamentally deal with it and openly deal with it and talk about how they're dealing with it, so that we can engage and enthuse younger people who are walking into a very, very difficult world for them at the moment.